Hello everybody and welcome back to another 2022 Overwatch League roster breakdown video. Today we're taking a look at the Hangzhou Spark. They finished the 2021 season with an overall record of 7-9 with a +1 differential. Had a pretty good early part of the season, going 4-0 in the June Joust before losing in the June Joust qualifiers to the NYXL, and then they didn't really find much success after that for the rest of the season. Like I said, they won 3 games outside of that tournament. We're not a very strong team, all things considered, but they did make a pretty significant number of changes to their roster going into 2022. Some new coaching changes, as well as a number of new players. So let's take a look at this roster and who they brought in. Here you can see their lineup. The DPS role, they have Architect, Shy, Pineapple, and ATVI. In the support line, they have Irony and Super Rich. And in the tank line, it's 3 familiar faces, Gushui, Ligue, and Bernard. So let's start with the DPS line, as always. 2 returning faces in Architect and Shy, and 2 rookies in Pineapple and ATVI. Architect, of course, started his career at the San Francisco Shock. He was there in 2019, 2020, and then, or 2018, 2019, and then was traded to the Hangzhou Spark during the 2020 season. Architect's pretty good. Obviously, he's best known for his Genji and his Pharah, but he can play some Widow as well. A pretty kind of flexible player, but you're never really going to put him on that hit scan role because they have Shy on this team, who is, in my opinion, the superstar for this team. His hit scan play last season was phenomenal. He is among the most elite hit scan players in the league. I don't really see many situations where he will be not their starter in the DPS lineup and the hit scan role in particular. They have 4 DPS players, so they do, in the event they need double hit scan, have what they need for that. And I guess in the event that they need double flex DPS, they have the need for that. The thing that I'm most interested in kind of looking at is we know Shy is going to play for most of the season. It's a question of whether or not Architect or ATVI is their primary flex DPS player. Because ATVI is another flex DPS player, plays much of the same stuff as Architect. He's going to play your Genji and your Echo and your Pharah and your Tracer, much like Architect does. And I think that Architect has been okay with this Spark team. I've heard some really I've heard some people say he's pretty bad, and they're surprised that the Spark re-signed him. I'm not surprised about it, brought him back. I think he's still a good player and someone who I think 100% should still be in the league. It's just a matter at this point of will ATVI kind of surpass him? ATVI's younger, plays a lot of the same role. Is not a Chinese player, which is one of the things you could look at if they wanted to kind of maybe go more Chinese with this roster. I don't think that's the route they're going because they have to have at least, well, they don't have to have, but most likely they will have at least 2 Korean players in at any given time. So I don't think that is going to be what they're doing. Both of their hit scan DPS players are Chinese, though, so Pineapple is somebody who plays hit scan role. He also does play Tracer as well, so I don't know which of their Tracer players is the best Tracer, but if it's Tracer Ash or something like that, Tracer Cassidy, it'll be interesting to see if they have Pineapple in on the Tracer, or if they have Architect, or if they have ATVI. I think it's interesting to look at this DPS lineup because it just seems like a lot. And this is the thing that the Spark do. This is one of the heftiest rosters we've looked at so far for 2022. It's a 9-player roster. Very few rosters are that big this season. Most rosters are pretty small going into 2022 because it's 5v5 now. You don't need as many players on the lineup. And so a lot of teams have decided to go smaller. It's a trend we saw last season, and we're seeing it again this season. So not that surprising that we're seeing it. I do think it's interesting, though, to look at some of these rosters and see what teams are deciding to do. Because it is always interesting when teams opt to do different things and take different approaches for things than some other teams are. So I don't really know what the expectation is for this team. I don't really know what to expect in terms of who they're going to start on DPS other than Shy. Shy will be playing a lot, but depending on what the meta is, right? If it's a lot of Tracer, who plays Tracer? If we see a lot of Echo or a lot of Pharo, whatever stuff like that, is it going to be Architect? Is it going to be Alpha Yi? Or are we going to see Pineapple? I really don't know what to expect. It's going to be the type of thing where we'll kind of see. I think they're going to be experimenting a bit early in the season with who they play. But only time will tell at this point what will happen. But it is interesting to me. I'm very intrigued by this lineup and by this roster because when you have 4 different DPS players and there's a lot of overlap between them, it's always really hard to say for sure what's going on. There is a lot of different teams that kind of take different approaches with DPS. And this to me looks like the Spark are kind of preparing themselves for every possible kind of path down the road, right? If they still think Architect is the answer, well, then they'll use him. If Architect doesn't look as good, they have their backup. They have someone ready to play in Alpha Yi in the event they need him. If it's double hit scan, they're prepared as well with Pineapple. If Shy, regresses or something, I think DPS is one of those places where if you're going to take up some roster spaces for any role, that's the one I would say is probably the best one to do it with, because DPS, you never really know what you're going to run into. You never know what the meta is going to be. You never know when you need like a silly hero meta where you need someone who just plays Doomfist a lot or just plays Genji really well, and you need to bring them out. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this Spark lineup, but I'm intrigued looking at it with the DPS in particular. But let's move on to the supports for this team. They have 2 supports on this team. They have Irony, who is a Korean flex support player, and they have Super Rich, who is a Chinese main support player. Super Rich has been around for a long time. That is a name that many of you should be familiar with if you have been following the Overwatch scene for a while. He comes over recently from Team CC, but he's played for a lot of teams in the past. LGD, Lucky Future, but he's with Team CC for 2 years, so he was there for a very long time. But definitely a well-known player in the Chinese contender scene. Someone who is going to be playing the main support role, as I said. So your Lucio, your Mercy, and your Brig, and maybe, if necessary, the Batiste. I don't know if Super Rich is someone who has a history playing Batiste, but that is really kind of what I would expect in the event that you have like a Bab Zen or Bab Ana meta. And then, of course, you have Irony, who is the person who's going to play the Zen and the Ana, and also probably play some Bap and some Moira when needed. He most recently was on Bilibili Gaming, which is the academy team for the Hangzhou Spark, so that doesn't surprise me. That's where he's coming from. He played in some other places as well, Team BM and BM Raven, but most kind of notably definitely would be Bilibili Gaming. I'm not familiar with Irony too much. Definitely more recent kind of rise in the Overwatch ecosystem. Bilibili was only in 2021, Team BM in 2020. So relatively recent, his kind of rise to the Overwatch scene. So I've heard pretty good things about him, though, from what I've seen. I don't think he's going to be the star flex DPS. I don't think he's going to be the best one coming into the season. I don't think he's going to be like the best like rookie or anything. But I think he's consistent as much as possible. And that is one of the things that I am intrigued by. This is a team that has had some kind of weird things with their support line over the past couple seasons. Obviously, they had Mika and Coldus for a while. They had IDK for a long time. They had MCD last season, and then they got rid of MCD. And then they kind of were doing this weird support line thing. So they only have 2 supports this season. So they're going all in on Super Rich, and they're going all in on Irony. I don't think it's going to be the best support line in the league, but I certainly think it is up there among some of the top kind of ones I'm interested in seeing, and one of the ones I'm excited to watch, because we don't see a lot of Chinese main supports come into the league and kind of blow us away. Obviously, Yveltal did, and we saw a lot of good things from Nisha. Mika had some moments, but really, we don't see that a lot. Like, Langsa didn't really have that big impact. And so I'm interested in seeing Super Rich, who's been around for a long time, come in and see what he is able to bring to this team, because I think he's been a very, very good player in contenders for a while, and it's good to see him finally getting his shot in the Overwatch League. Overall, with the support line, I'd say it's a pretty good, kind of average support line. It's difficult to say for sure, but that is definitely one of the things that I am looking at right now in terms of kind of where this team is at. How good is the support line compared to the rest of the teams around them in the Asian division? And then also kind of comparing it just to other teams in general. I think it's kind of average compared to a lot of the other ones, but at this point, we won't know for sure until we see the full kind of lineups of all the teams in the APAC region. Finally, let's move on to the tanks. As I mentioned before, all three of them are returning to this team from last season. Gushui is their main tank. I still think Gushui is an incredible main tank. I still think he is among the best in the league. I think he's consistent. He can play everything, even if not at the highest level. He may not be the best on every hero. He's still very good on every hero, I think. And someone who I think brings a lot of great things to the table. I'm still a believer in Gushui, so I don't think there's much to say about him when most people know that Gushui brings his all to the table pretty much all the time. So I'm excited to see Gushui once again. He is my favorite player in this team, just straight up. I love Gushui. He's one of my favorite players in the league. I think he has always been such an exciting player to watch, and I think that when he is playing at his best, there is arguably nobody better. That's just the type of player he is. So excited to see some more Gushui in 2022. What I'm interested in seeing for this season is who the off-tank player for the team is. Is it going to be Ligue, who I think was probably the player that this team wanted to be their primary starting off-tank last season before he had mental health problems that required him to take a back seat for the entire season and was with Billy Gaming, kind of a two-way contract, but didn't actually start that way. It just kind of ended up happening because he was having issues with his mental health. And so for most of the last season, we saw Bernard play. Now, I like Bernard. I think Bernard's a very good player. I thought he looked very good in London. I thought he looked good in Hangzhou Spark. He looked good at Fusion University all those years ago now. So I'm definitely interested in seeing Bernard play. I'm excited to see him playing for the Spark again. But it's really a question of, will he be the person that plays over Ligue, or will they go with Ligue? We also, of course, don't know what to expect from the tanks. How will they play off tank? Heroes, will we see players, flex? Will main tanks play off tanks? Will off tanks play main tanks? And they try to just kind of roll with the one tank player they have. Don't know for sure yet. We haven't really seen enough to know what's going on there. But when you have three tanks on this roster, one of them isn't going to play, like, ever. When you only have one tank player in the game at any given time, you're already going to be splitting play time between two, most likely. If they are going with the, one person plays the main tank heroes, one person plays the off-tank heroes, chances are you're going to be seeing a lot of swapping between tank lines, especially early in the season. So I already think that one of Ligue or Bernard is not going to get a lot of playtime. So it really comes down to the Spark, finding out which player that they want to play, and then potentially moving off of one of them if that is the option they have to go with. Because we didn't see Ligue at all last season, despite being arguably the better of the two off-tanks. Or at least the one that people were more excited to see on this roster than Bernard. Like I said, I'm a very big fan of Bernard. I think Bernard's very good. I don't know whether or not he is better or worse than Ligue, because I haven't seen enough Ligue, and I haven't seen, Gushui play alongside Ligue and Gushui play alongside Bernard and be able to compare the two, because we haven't seen Ligue. So it'll be interesting to me to see what happens with this part of the roster. I think Bernard, if I am the Hangzhou Spark, if Ligue and Bernard are pretty much equal, I think you have to consider moving off of one of them. Especially if you can get something for it. And I think if you look at a team, or you look at Bernard, he's a Korean player, and you look at some of these teams right now that don't have Korean off-tanks, you could probably move Bernard for a little bit if that is something that you think is worth your time. But that's a risk, potentially, because it seems like, Ligue has some things that cause him to kind of take a back seat, and you don't want that happening during the season, and you get stuck with no off tank. So that's why I think they went with both of them, because I think they want Liga to be their starter, but they know that there's a possibility that he can't play, and so they went with Bernard and Liga just to kind of be safe. This is a very interesting part for this roster, and I think it's one of the things that is going to be the most telling about whether or not this team succeeds. How well they're able to manage this tank line and who ends up being their starter and playing for pretty much the entire season really will kind of tell us what this team is and whether or not they are going to find some of the success that they had at points in 2021 and 2020, but have not really been able to hit their 2019 peaks that they had. Very strong season 2019, and ever since they've just kind of been slowly fading into obscurity. So it's an interesting team. As I mentioned before, they made some coaching changes, some pretty significant coaching changes. Their head coach now is Chang Goon, who spent a long time with the Seoul Dynasty, and also was with the London Spitfire when they won the Grand Finals in 2018. So has had some success in the past. They also have Miro and Neko, two Overwatch League veterans, though Miro was probably better known for his time as a member of Lunatic High in the pre-Overwatch League days. They also have Zhao Gui, who's an assistant coach, who's also like the former team leader or something. I don't remember what it was that he did. He had some other position before. He was also a commentator at one point in time. It's a whole thing. They've had a lot of different people in those positions. So I'm excited to see this team. Truly, I think it's a very interesting team, and one that there's a lot of players on the team I like. I'm a huge Gushui fan. I love Gushui as a player, so and I like Bernard a lot. So I'm really interested to see this team. I don't know what to make of it, especially because I think that they still look to be kind of a middling APAC team right now. Based on what we've seen from Shanghai and Chengdu and Philadelphia, I really think those rosters right now look better than what we've seen out of Hangzhou so far. Now, Hangzhou has a lot of rookies. They have struggled in the past to mix their Chinese and Korean players. Like I said, they had a good season 2019, getting 4th overall. But it was still like a pretty big gap between New York, who is number 3, and Hangzhou, who is number 4. You just kind of could tell that there was a pretty, you had your top 2 teams, then a bit of a gap between them and New York, then a pretty big gap between New York and the rest of the league. It felt like for a lot of the 2019 season. And so even then, they weren't like an elite level team. So we haven't really seen it work super well for this Spark team at all this season, or at all in their entire time in the Overwatch scene. So I'm very interested to see if this season is any different. With a more kind of established and somewhat successful head coach at the helm, it'll be interesting to see how much success this team finds. I really don't know what to expect really from this team. I'm pretty hesitant to say a lot of great things about this team. I don't really think that they look right now to be a incredible elite level team that's going to be dominating in the Overwatch, APAC region. But we'll see, I guess, what happens. It's going to be interesting to watch this team in 2022. So let me know what you think about this Hangzhou Spark team in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts on them. But that is going to be all from me for today. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed and want more videos like this in the future, consider liking and subscribing. It really does help out the channel. That's it for me. Next video, we're taking a look at the NYXL, so you already know I'm excited for that one. I am ready to talk about my boys repping New York. So until then, I'm going to get out of here. Hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye bye.